Hi, and welcome to the 6th episode of the 10th Divine podcast. This is a show about Elder Scrolls Online, and I am your host, Raven. I am here with my amazing co-host, Shanty. How you doing this week, Shanty?
We're all pretty good. Little frustrated with work situation, but that's what work situations always end up being, right?
I also have differently frustrating work situations going on, so yeah, I totally understand.
But like I said, aside from that, I'm good. And how are you doing this week?
I am absolutely, completely, totally, and utterly exhausted because I have been running a horse show this week. So I've been in Gloucestershire, it's about a 3-hour drive from where I am at the moment. I did 34,000 steps yesterday, mostly walking up and down a hill. So that was a lot. I did about 22,000 on Friday. I've only done about 10,000 today, and then I've sat in my car, and I have come home. So if I seem a bit vague, and if usefully I forget how to form words in the English language, it's because I've been talking solidly for 72 hours, which is not great. Not least because this is the first of 2 podcasts that I will be recording this evening. So the chances of me being able to remember how to speak any languages by the time I go to bed is really remote, I would say. But hey, I survived. I survived. I'm here. We are very excited to have with us today Loctavian. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
We are very glad to have you here. What have we been all getting up to in ESO since Shanty, since we last recorded? What have you been up to?
Well, I finally got around to setting up my alt characters so that they are all doing writs daily now.
Okay.
Finally got that ticked off the to-do list. On my Dragon Knight, I've got around to getting my armory and have 2 separate builds going, one for solo, one for group. And I went into my first vet dungeon with randoms last night.
Oh, with randoms. Awesome. Brave.
Oh, I specifically chose, it wasn't a random, but it was still my first vet.
Cool. Which was it?
Banished Cells 1.
Okay, cool. And did it go all right?
Yeah, we nearly had the no death right up until the last boss.
Hey!
And of course, it was me.
I had no death ghosts.
Oh, well, that's a big achievement, so well done.
And how about you, Loctavian? What have you been up to in game recently?
A little bit of everything. We just ran our housing contest. I do a lot of housing contests. We do a big one called Chopped, which is based on a Food Network show here in the States, where chefs have to use a bunch of ingredients that don't go together. In the housing version, I take a bunch of housing items that don't go together. We challenge housers to have to build with housing items they might not otherwise use. So just got done running that, and other than that, taking advantage of the PvP event to level up my my alliance rankings to unlock fashion stuff, because the rankings unlock different dye colors. So still on the hunt to get all the different dye colors in the game. That's been my driving goal since moving to PC, is to unlock all the fashion stuff.
That is a good goal. I have not played a video game at all of any description for about 2 weeks because of this horse show nonsense, which is not great when you're a content creator. So my World of Warcraft show later is going to be interesting. What have you done in WoW? Nothing at all. But never mind. Hopefully this week I will be back in both Azeroth and Tamriel, and we'll have more to talk about eventually.
Okay, so let us go ahead and dive into the interview here. So, Loctavian, can you give us a brief history of how you came to find out about the Elder Scrolls in general and ESO in particular, and what other kind of games do you play?
I guess the easiest way is I'll tackle that kind of in a mixed order from the way you asked it, but it's kind of the easiest road. So when I first started playing video games as a kid on the OG Nintendo Entertainment System, one of the first games that I liked every game I played, but then I discovered this little gem called Final Fantasy. So that was my introduction to RPGs. Obviously, it's a lot more basic on the NES, but you have your little party. It's very D&D-esque. You're walking around the world. There's quests, and then that got me really hooked on RPGs. Initially, that kind of JRPG genre. So obviously, as the Super Nintendo comes out and Genesis comes out, I'm playing, Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VI. I'm playing Secret of Mana. I'm playing Chrono Trigger. Any RPGs I can get my hands on. But there's not a lot of. I don't have a PC. I'm a console gamer in the early days of console gaming. So there's not a lot of like open world. Like Final Fantasy games have an open world, but not in the same way that we expect with Elder Scrolls. But then my dad, through work, gets this PC. Says, hey, I'll buy you whatever game you want. Your birthday's coming up. I see a game. It's got a skull and a sword on the cover. It's called Daggerfall. And I go, oh, that looks really cool. I love RPGs, and this one looks really cool. I've read about it in my gaming magazines back in the day when we got magazines with the little demo discs and all that.
Demo discs on the front.
Oh, demo discs.
I was going to say, kids these days will never know. Buying your PC Gamer magazine and plugging in a CD into your disk drive to get a tiny trial of a game. Luckily nowadays you can just click downloads for demos on Steam. But and then Daggerfall blew me away. Like even though, so now I'm on PC, I'm on Daggerfall. It's this big open procedurally generated world, and I'm pretty hooked there in these open world RPGs. From there, I discover other games that had already been out. So I've discovered your Fallout 1s and your Fallout 2s and this whole big world of open world RPGs. But I wouldn't say it's Daggerfall that got me. That's how I found out about Elder Scrolls games. But to me, it was kind of a fantasy, pretty cool world, interesting. It was Morrowind. Morrowind with its weird silt striders and it's like almost alien like Dunmer and the lore. That's when I start reading all the lore books is Morrowind. So Morrowind's how I get hooked. Just completely hooked on the Elder Scrolls. So I kind of went from JRPGs, which I still love, to open world RPGs, which I still love, answering what other types of games I play. And that led me to Elder Scrolls. And then I started my MMOs with Ultima Online's the first one. Ultima Online's like the first MMO that kind of comes out. I'm Ultima Online. That's my introduction to this shared social, bigger universe of MMOs. From there, I play a little bit of EverQuest, but then, I love the Warcraft games. This whole thing, this World of Warcraft comes out, and like millions of other people. I'm inundated with World of Warcraft. I get into raiding. I'm the heal lead. I love just pressing one button, so I'm a freaking Healadin back in the classic and the BC days. But I'm doing heal leading for my major raids, so it helps to have that kind of paladin healing. But I get to about Kata, and I know of other MMOs, but I'm just in real deep with WoW. Around Kata, raiding about the second tier into Kata raids. I lose interest. I don't know if it's how the game changed. I don't know if it's because my connection to World of Warcraft was really through those like games that were attached to like the RTS or whatever it was, or maybe it's just I'm getting really busy with college. But I kind of step away from WoW at that point.
That would be around Firelands.
Yeah, around that. Yeah. About 20. It's about 10 years ago now. I think it's about 2012.
Oh, don't say things like that.
I didn't think it was
a little bit longer than that actually, because MOP was 2012.
Don't.
Oh, okay,
no,
a little bit.
No.
Yeah. I just remember talking about it and then looking back at dates and realizing how. But I think I just kind of also burnt myself out on MMOs. So I never really scaled myself back. I started going hard in the whole like end game raid thing, going for like server first, world first, all the way back with like Onyxia and like really hard in Burning Crusade and Lich King. So like it was a job. And when you're like the heal lead or when you're even leading your 20 man raids, you're like, you got spreadsheets on spreadsheets and you're organized. You have to tell people the bad news, like about, hey, really want you to continue raiding with us, but if you can't get your DPS, it's this whole job on a job. I'm in college and I'm burnt out. So when I start coming back to MMOs, everybody I basically knew had a lot of them had left WoW or they'd like dispersed to different servers. And so I just started picking up different MMOs, and that's how this long-winded speech, that's kind of how I get to ESO is, okay. I want something a little more casual to play. I want something that I can play. The other thing is, post college, I'm moving around a lot. I don't necessarily have a PC all the time, so I want something I can play on console. So it kind of comes down to, do I go with Final Fantasy? Do I go with Elder Scrolls? These are two games that I really love. And then I just had more friends who were getting into Elder Scrolls Online. And so that's kind of how ESO becomes this like game that I play a lot, and then I'll take breaks from, and I'll play a lot and take breaks from. Kind of fills that like MMO thing without having the same intense connections. I'm sure you can more casually play World of Warcraft, but the way I played World of Warcraft, you couldn't.
That will be very familiar to many of our listeners, I'm sure. Just another kind of get to know you type question for anybody who's not familiar with you. Do you have like a single character? Do you have a whole bunch of alts? What's your play style?
So a lot of MMOs, especially Elder Scrolls Online, speaking about making alts and doing writs on alts, kind of rewards alt play. But I've always been a main sort of character. So I have my main that I play. I try to get, like, there's account-wide achievements on ESO now that came in an update or two back. But even with that, I've always just tried to, especially before account-wide achievements, wanted to collect all the achievements. And before account-wide achievements, I had to be on one character. So I put a lot of work into my main, especially since you can heal, you can tank, you can do stamina DPS, you can do magic and DPS on one character. But I do have alts. When I mentioned earlier, like fashion's my end game, I do a lot of fashion stuff. More characters means more opportunities to use that really robust outfitting, costuming system. So I have my alts, but oftentimes my alts, they do writs during events. They do like additional quests. I design them really well, and then they're more niche. I don't have like, my main can do like everything I need it to do. My alts are kind of like very specific, like, this is my necro healer for when we need a different type of healer for trials, or this is my kind of my PvP character. Like, they're very niche, whereas my main's robust, and I probably put the majority of my hours, if you did like slash played, I'd have most of my hours on my main, and then like a smattering of hours on my alts.
Cool.
So, what role and class do you typically play? Or since you do say that you have different characters for different niches, what's your favorite?
So I'm a healer. I'm a healer main, except for ESO's weird because I had burnt myself out doing healing in MMOs with EverQuest and then World of Warcraft. So my main on console, I moved to PC when I started making content for Elder Scrolls Online in October of 2020. But for the 5 years, on and off over 5 years previous, I mostly played Elder Scrolls Online on console because I had started on console when I was moving around after college, and most of my friends played on console for the early years of me playing ESO. So I was a Khajiit Stamblade, so DPS on console. But when moving to PC, it had been long enough. I'm a Nightblade healer, so my predominant thing in MMOs. If you look at other MMOs I play, like in Lost Ark, my main is a Bard, which is a support role. In Final Fantasy 14, I've leveled up a Cleric, and I went into Sage. Like, MMOs in general, I generally gravitate towards support and healing roles.
Yeah, that's cool. I also tend to gravitate towards healer, although somebody else has currently got the healing spot in our little ESO group, so I'm having to DPS, which is like super irritating. But
and you're also the backup tank.
Oh, and I'm also the backup tank. That is true. That is true. Which is weird. I've still not quite got into the tanking headspace in ESO, to be fair. How are you enjoying High Isle?
High Isle's really good. I enjoyed the couple dungeons. The Ascending Tides dungeons I thought were really well made. Kind of the prologue dungeons into High Isle. High Isle itself is really fun. I am a fan of Elder Scrolls stories, because Elder Scrolls stories in the single player mainline games, there's always like, even if we look at Skyrim, there's like the big threat of Alduin and dragons, but at the same time, there's the equally important Civil War story. So Elder Scrolls has always been torn, and like in Morrowind even, it's like there's the different houses, but there's also like this big threat of Dagoth. So it's always been torn between these like world-ending threats and these like political like machinations. And I've always been more drawn to the lived-in stories than those machinations. So like in ESO, I really like Orsinium, and then I've really liked High Isle because High Isle's a story about the Ascendant Order, and they're kind of an identifiable, like you can identify with them as a villain because they're villains, but they're talking about how this kind of quest of nobles for the Ruby Throne is like turning a blind eye to the plight of people, and like there's like this whole identifiable like structure. So I really like High Elf because those are the stories I really like. As much as I like slapping down yet another Daedric Lord or starting another world, stopping another world-ending threat, I really like these stories that are a little more they're still high fantasy but more grounded and more about like toppling the established order versus, oh, here we go again, it's another year, time to stop the world from being blown up once again.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think one of World of Warcraft's current problems is that we've saved the world too many times now. Let's do something smaller, please.
It's not special to save the world if you've saved the world 18 times, right? Eventually you've saved the world enough and you want to do something a little bit
exactly.
a little different.
Yeah, exactly. And that we're saving Azeroth from death itself this time, so I don't really know how we're going to top that, but I guess I'll find out in December.
So you're a Twitch streamer and a podcaster. How did you get into content creation? And tell us about the Kraken Cast.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I have always been somebody who likes to create. I do really well in creative fields. I have ADHD, and sometimes that can be prohibitive in a non-self-employed, non-creative workspace just because of how my brain works, the ability to like lose focus on things or hyper focus on other things. But for about 6 years before I sold it, I ran in pop culture, anime style, comic style conventions and events in the Pacific Northwest. And then I moved from that into, and then my degrees are in film and theatrical arts, lighting, sound design. So I've always kind of been in those creative spaces, but eventually I moved into the tech field for a while up until COVID. So I was on the other end of content creation because I did reputation management, brand development. I would work with influencer marketing and stuff like that. And then so once COVID hit and I got released from my job because lots of downsizing at the start of COVID, I said, I've wanted to do this. Originally, I was going to do IRL streaming. Like on the side, I wanted to. I traveled before COVID. I used to travel a lot.
Yeah.
I do live action role playing. I do all these things. So it's like, and I watch a lot of that sort of streams. I'm like, let's do some travel streams. Let's do some food streams. And then COVID hits. I already wanted to get into streaming. And eventually I just go, you know what? Let's do some just chatting. And I started mostly as a just chatting streamer and then kind of fell into adding on Elder Scrolls Online and games. So that's kind of how I kind of came to get into content creation. It's just, I always like to create things. I like to do things that are creative. I like to, and I also really am extroverted, and especially in COVID, like I was like, how do I have connections with people? Well, content creation seems like a good way to maybe find community and do that. And then the podcasting part is just kind of, it's an extension of that. I did some interviews early on in content creation where I had people on and I just asked them questions while we played games. And I went, hey, let's do this in a little, maybe a more controlled format. There is a joke that people say, but there's a little bit of truth to the joke, at least here in the States, which is like, if you're a white American over 35, you probably have a podcast.
Yeah.
And as a white American over 35, I have a podcast.
You're contractually obliged to start a podcast. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a joke, but I think the reason so many people do make podcasts, though, is, and I don't know about both of you, but it's like you're very passionate about something. You like something. You're an expert on something. You just have fun interacting with somebody. Like, for whatever reason, like it's fun to be able to talk about that thing dedicatedly. And like, well, I can do that on stream. Stream has other elements. Like when I'm content creation, I'm eating Bean Boozles, I'm dancing, maybe I'm playing a game. There's like 18 different conversation topics coming up in chat. So podcasting, and the reason I started Kraken Cast, and what Kraken Cast is it's like kind of a one-on-one sit down. I sit down with other people. I sit down with a lot of content creators, but I've also sat down with the Gina Bruno, who's the community manager at ESO. I sat down with the lead dev, Rich. Recently I sat down with CJ Greb, who's the art director. So I sit down with people in the like creative and gaming space. and it lets us have a one-on-one conversation. And I try to have conversations where that just not only talk about content creation or community manager, what they do, but also just like, hey, what are you about as a person? So like with Gina's into like cars and things like that. So we talked about car shows and stuff like that. So it's a way to interact, have a conversation, share that with other people, and get to know people on a level, and maybe bring out things that are not always coming out in their roles or in content creation. So that's kind of what Kraken Cast is. It's just kind of a one-on-one conversation to try to get into what the whys and hows of a person.
Yeah, sounds cool. We had Gina on here for our first episode. She was great to talk to. She was really engaging, really easy to speak to. It was really great.
ESO and Gina very specifically, but a lot of their team are very accessible. I would say more accessible than almost any other gaming company, and that's something that's really awesome about them, because Gina is a community manager, but even being a community manager in a game, it's very, very rare, I think, for a company, especially a larger gaming company, to have their community manager for their very large game be like, oh, you're starting a podcast? Sure, let me come on that.
Yeah.
Because that was similar for me as Gina was on my first season of the podcast. She had no reason. The podcast had just started, so it had no known viewership. And as a content creator, I was averaging about 25 viewers then. It's not like I was a partnered streamer or anything. Like, I was very in my formative stages as well when she came on my podcast. So like the fact that usually a community manager is like, well, who are you? How much have you done? Whereas she's just wanted to jump on a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was astounded when she agreed to it. It was just like, what? Seriously? Like, okay. That's amazing. Let's do this thing. In 10 years of podcasting on World of Warcraft, I've yet to speak to anybody who works for Blizzard. Never mind. So Twitch can be a really challenging place for us queer folks. How do you deal with the toxicity, and have you had any problems with the kind of hate raids and stuff that's been going on?
Oh, yeah. Hate raids. Well, sorry. So hate raids really, they've always been a thing, but they really kicked up over COVID, and I'd say that they were at their worst actually last year. So I experienced hate raids throughout last year. I've been doxxed. I have been swatted. I've been swatted a ton of times. I luckily live in a location where the police here are aware of cybercrime, so I luckily didn't have to go through. I did not have to have my door kicked in and a gun pointed at my head, which has happened to content creators who have been swatted when they're not familiar with kind of swatting. And for people who might not be familiar, swatting is where somebody calls in a fake threat. They say you're holding a hostage. They say you're doing something very, very illegal to try to get cops to come in and scare/harm you. So I went through a lot of that. Had to work with my authorities and get my poster and stuff put up so they, know to not just like come in to the point that one of that there is literally an officer of the law who, when they get a call, pops into my chat. They text me, but they also just pop in my chat and go, "Oh, you're streaming. Have a good stream," which is kind of their way of going, this has happened enough with these hate raids that we just are popping and go, okay, you're live. This is definitely one of those situations. So I've dealt with a lot of it. It's difficult. Luckily, running conventions, working in tech field, things I've done in my life, while it's never good to get hate raided, I feel worse for people who've never had to like respond to a crisis like situation. Because like when it happened to me, I already had an established mod team. I already had kind of a process. I knew how to like lock in my thing and be like, we can't let, because if I just go offline, they win. If I start blasting off at them, they win. If I do nothing, they win. In their minds, they always win. So it's a matter of like, how do I get my community, like, because they're going to feel like a certain way too. How do we get back to like, how do we take control of the situation? So it's unfortunately dealing with that as a queer person has been very consistent and common. However, the way to deal with that is just through community. It's through talking to other people. It's talking to people who've gone through it. I was reached out to people who had suffered from hate raids when it happened to me. When I see other people be the victim of it, I reach out to them. And it's just kind of like a how do we create a community and a network to help each other, let people process through it, because Twitch's tools are very lacking. The fact that you can have one email address and generate 1,000 accounts, bot accounts, makes it like on the creator to deal with. And then kind of into like that and ESO Pride. The main reason I did ESO Pride is I had this thought before in the past where other games that I'd seen had communities that organized their Pride events within their communities. MMOs are a good space for that. But I also was like, there's a lot of hate rates. There is a lot of bigotry. The ESO category had been targeted by a former ESO member, and I'm not going to give them the wavelength of mentioning their name, but the ESO category itself had been targeted by hate rates back in February. So I was like, we need something where we can just come together as a community. And so I reached out to Gina and Zos and said, hey, this is my idea. Here's a whole synopsis. Here's a whole write-up. Can I get your support? And they said yes. And I just started reaching out to other people in the community. So in a way, the hate raiders for wanting to like stamp out, queer folk within ESO or stamp out queer folk on Twitch, inadvertently their work, and I'm sure they'll be just thrilled to know, led to a hugely successful coming together of LGBTQIA plus people and allies in basically, their negativity spawned something of much greater positivity. So they got the exact opposite, I'm sure, of what they wanted there.
Which is the only thing we can possibly do for them, give them exactly the opposite, shout louder and do more stuff together. That was amazing. Do you have any idea, do you want to just tell us a bit about what you did for Pride, and do you have any idea how many people were involved?
So for Pride, what we did is I did kind of a 3-tiered approach. One is I organized a couple contests. ZeniMax, again, was very nice to give prizes. I'd asked them for this. There's this rainbow emote that only comes from one specific crown crate when it's in season. So I'd asked them to let us have some of those as a prize. So we did like housing contests. We did an art contest, a fashion contest, a screenshot contest to involve the community in that way. We organized on EU and NA, and then next year I'll be working with people to make sure we have them on console as well. We did actual parades within the game. And then we also did a number of spotlights on my channel about like queer representation, because there's a lot of normalization of queer relationships and queer characters within Elder Scrolls Online. So we did a focus on that. We focused on the community guilds that were like that, and then we raised money for the Trevor Project. We raised about $7,400 for the Trevor Project throughout it.
Awesome! That's amazing.
As far as people involved, we had pretty much a lot of the major inclusive guilds were involved. The EU parade was over 100 people. The NA parade was so big that not everybody could be involved because we overloaded the server. So next year, I'm going to work with other creators that we have multiple parades on NA and on EU going on at the same time in different zones, because we broke Auradon to the point that people got kicked off and couldn't log on if their characters were in Auradon because we had so many people there. Talking to the staff, that's probably about 200 people in the zone, the majority of those being there specifically for the parade. So there's hundreds of people who came out to participate in the parade. There was thousands of people who said positive and nice things online. Hundreds of people came through the stream. So it was a huge portion of the ESO community, I would say, was involved at some level, be it watching the streams, other content creators broadcasting the parade, people coming out for the parade, entering the contests, guilds rallying their guilds behind it, things like that. So it was a lot of people were involved at the end of the day. If I had to estimate, with the parades alone, that was hundreds of people, but it probably over 1,000 people throughout were involved in some way or another.
Oh, that's incredible. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the server breaking, because if you hadn't, I was going to.
I had no way to know if I said, hey, let's do this parade on Tamriel. I didn't know what people's schedules were. I didn't know if it was going to be like 15 people walking down the road. So we learned a lot. I took a lot of notes and got a lot of feedback. Well, I already talked to Gina. I already talked to Zos. We're definitely doing it again next year. They were happy to have me take the reins and do it next year. But this was something I reached out to them at the start of May.
Okay.
and said, hey, in June, I'd like to do this. And I was like, I don't know how successful it'll be. So let me just try to do it on my own because I don't want to like go too far with it. I was to see how it goes, but it was so successful, and we're going to bring more people on and do it up bigger next year. But yeah, that way we hopefully don't. As fun as it is to say so many people came out, we broke the server, but
yeah, let's try to not.
We want to make sure everybody who wants to take part can take part because we had more. We had so many more people who would have liked to take part but couldn't even get on because Arden was full. That wasn't something I even anticipated. I didn't know how great the showing was going to be on either E or NA.
That's amazing. Amazing. Just going to take a quick moment here to remind you that this show is part of Bonus Roll Productions. You can find our show and lots of other great MMO-focused podcasts, such as Girls Gone Well, a podcast reborn, and For Azeroth over at bonusroll.gg.
All right, so you've alluded to it a couple times, but what can people who've not tuned into a stream of yours before expect?
Just weird stuff. Just get real weird with it. So I'd say my streams evolved a lot. I've been streaming for about 2 years now. Into August, into this month will be right around 2 years I've started streaming. But a lot of the things that are consistent throughout is obviously I do play a lot of Elder Scrolls Online, though I've been moving in a direction where Elder Scrolls Online will always be a big part of my content, but I've been exploring other things. We've recently checked out Final Fantasy 14. We're checking out other MMOs. I'm starting to do something starting this month where people who are really passionate about an MMO, whether it's when I played in the past or have never played, I'm going to take a day and just like let them show me around their game. So MMO open world RPGs. As far as streaming stuff goes, we do a lot of like dancing. We do a lot of bean boozles. We do a lot of challenges. And then I'm just always trying to find unique ways to like involve the community and interact. So a lot of the content's going to be a mixture of MMO stuff and a mixture of just like dancing and interactive stuff mostly.
Cool. What advice do you have for people who are new to ESO?
Don't do everything at once. It is very overwhelming. And this might just be the best MMO news, but ESO especially. So ESO is unique in that when it released, it was following back when we had a king of MMOs, hello, WoW. Every MMO that came out tried to be WoW. So ESO, for people who, it's 8 years old now, but in its first year, it had the general structure. Here's your starting zone. Here's your level, like 5 to 15. It had the standard MMO progression. When they realized from a very outcrying of the community, especially a lot of people who didn't play MMOs who were coming from like Skyrim who wanted to try an MMO, they're like, it's not very Elder Scrolls to have to do a set progression. Like Elder Scrolls has always been around like, I don't want to be here. I'm just going to go to this next town. But that makes ESO a little more daunting because the first ESO from level 1, go through the little tutorial area. There's a room of portals at the end of the tutorial. You can start wherever you want with whatever storyline you want to start with. There's even in the base game with no DLC, like 20 some zones. So it's very daunting to be like, there's battlegrounds, there's dungeons, there's all these things, and I can go to any zone. So my biggest thing is like the best way to learn your class, even if you're going to be a PvPer, you're going to be a trial player, is just pick the zone, do the zone story where you start, and just kind of enjoy it because everything in ESO is voice acted. And if you try to like get into like fashion, housing, dungeons, PvP, now we have a card game called Tales of Tribute that's really fun. All like at the start, it can be overwhelming. And I found a lot of players who come through my streams feel overwhelmed. So I'm just like, just pick a story, enjoy the excellent voice acting, and just kind of level at your own speed. And as you level, you'll unlock dungeons, you'll unlock battlegrounds, and you can kind of dip your toes in. And then you can just go full commitment once you're there. But the best way to learn your class and enjoy the game is just to kind of like take the initial story at your own pace. Don't try to power level. This isn't a game where, oh no, I'm 8 years behind everyone. I need to power level to catch up. Since you can just do the content with them once you're 50, there's no need to power level. Just kind of take it at your own speed is my best advice.
Very sound advice it is too.
Indeed. going back to it's 8 years old and the outcry from the community, I have 2 words for you: veteran levels.
Oh, vet levels. I'll just I won't make it long, but just for anybody who plays ESO but hasn't played as long, I won't get into vet levels, but there was a time long ago when you would go into Maelstrom Arena. Orsinium came out. It's a year 1 DLC. That's where Maelstrom Arena came in. You had to do the veteran mode to get a weapon. There was not curated drops, so you could get the same weapon over and over. So to get my bow from VMA, from Maelstrom Arena, I had to run 56 veteran Maelstrom Arena attempts on one character to get my bow that I needed. Because also, Orsinium is before Morrowind came out and Clockwork City came out. So there's this thing in this game called transmutes, where if I have learned a trait, I can take my item to a transmute. I can pay these transmute crystals I've earned, and I can change my trait from one to the other. Also could not do that originally. The game has improved a lot, and I bring it up when you mention veteran levels, because changing from veteran ranks to the champion point system, adding in transmutes, adding in more recently curated drops, it's really nice because I feel like they have a focus on. There's things that people are always going to get mad at in the community when they change, and I'm not saying that every decision's right, but they do have a focus on, I feel, quality of life. And so you brought up veteran ranks, and it reminded me of 56 VMA runs for just one character's bow, because the first time the bow dropped, it had the wrong trait on it. So I had to keep running until I got the right trait, because the only way you could get an item is to run the thing so many times until not just the item dropped, but the item with the correct trait dropped, if you were trying to get like your meted out min-max set to be able to do like the hardest content.
Wow.
All right, so as a bit of a more fun question, can you tell us the history of your dance?
The history of my dance is also my biggest piece of advice I give streamers, is one and the same. The history of my dance is I was sitting one night and I'm here at my PC. I got a stream up on my second monitor, somebody I like to watch at night. So I'm just like listening to them. And I'm going through my OBS and I'm just kind of touching up my scenes. Every once in a while, I like to just go through and try to like clean up my overlays. And, I'm constantly tinkering with things. And I get the idea, I love Young Scrolls. By the way, the main dance I dance to, though I have multiple dances now, is Dagoth Wave by Young Scrolls. And I wanted to dance to it, so I sent a tweet to Young Scrolls and go, "Hey, I want to dance to this on my stream. Would that bother you?" Because I always like to ask content creators, musicians and stuff. I get a tweet back that says, "Yeah, just make sure you credit me." That's why on the dance screen it says "Music Dagoth Wave by Young Scrolls." But I was just doing it. I just put together the scene, and I'm like, I'm not a good dancer, but in my everyday life when I'm walking around my house, I sing what I do, which is why I sing a lot of what I do on stream, and I'll just find myself dancing to music. So I just I'll do a dance. So I start putting together the scene. I just get lost in the sauce. I get the background put together, the camera. I'm like, I like this. And then for a minute, I sit down and go, no one's going to like this. This is completely different than anything I've done on stream. Why did I just spend an hour and a half, 2 hours constructing a complete scene and thing for this? And I said, and this is where the advice comes in. I just go, no, let's just do it. Worst case, your community, worst case, it's not that people hate it. Worst case is you do it on stream, you present it, and chat goes from being active and talking to me to just saying nothing. The equivalent of a big, massive eye roll from the community. But at least, you did the scene. So my advice is, if you have an idea, you should just do it, because you don't know if it's going to be successful. Because then I did it, and then people liked it. And then I would do it on occasion. Then I do it with raids. And then I did it for channel points. And then I've had to up the channel points over time because I was dancing too much. The main point is, the history is, it was a whim. It was a random thing that came into my mind while I was sitting at my PC. And instead of going, this is different than what I do, or this is not what I do, or second guessing if people would like it, though I did have that moment, I just did it. And it turned out that it's resonated to the point that it's like, if I took it off the menu, I took it out of the channel point menu, and I no longer did the dance, I stopped doing it, my community would be very confused and sad. Like, even some days when I'm just like sore, or I'm feeling a little under the weather and I have to turn it off for the day. People understand, but they're like, oh. So, but yeah, it was a whim. There was the evolution of it was just a thought that I turned into reality and then turned out to resonate with the community. So we've gone on to do additional dances and more because it just turned out that the community really liked it.
Cool. Couple of fun questions to finish off. If you could take one race or species from the Elder Scrolls universe and transplant it into reality, which one would you choose?
It's a very loaded. That is a fun question. I'm trying to think. I feel like a lot of the races, as cool as they are, if I transplanted them into reality, would very quickly like. You can't say any of the elves. You can't go Altmer. You can't go Dunmer, because the next thing you know, they're just going to be conquering and taking over. It's in their nature. True. And I don't want to transplant as cool as the Nords and Imperials might be. I don't want to transplant them because at the end of the day, they're just basically like normal humans, right? So I think if I was going to take a race or species from Elder Scrolls and transplant it, it's going to be we're going to go with Horkers. I think Horker. We're gonna go with Elder Scrolls Online Horkers, and there's no lore written about it because I want to know how Horkers go from second era Elder Scrolls Online. Because if you run into a Horker in Elder Scrolls Online, they're cute and they're blubbery and they're rolling around. They're basically dogs with really janky, giant, tusky teeth. Like they're cute and they're fun in Elder Scrolls Online. If you've played Skyrim and you run into a Horker, they are sword mouth evil beings. And I just want to know. I want to know what happened to the poor Horkers between the second and the fourth era, because I'll take the cute. I like sea animals and sea creatures, so I'll take the cute Horkers from the second era, not the fourth era was that would murder me in my sleep.
Okay.
All right, and this is with a nod to Krakencast because it inspired this particular question. Who would win, 6 billion Guar or one of each Pokemon?
I really like this question. I know this question, the origin of this question, but my answer is going to be the same: ESO focused or not focused. I think 6 billion is such an incomprehensible number that even the fact that Pokemon's literally have like gods and dragons and all these things, at the end of the day, there is still just like 1,000 of them, and they have to sleep sometimes. And 6 billion is such an incomprehensible number all in one place. And unlike lions, Gars can swim and go in the water. So I'm going to go with the 6 billion Gar because I think eventually in the Zap Brannigan from Futurama way, I think if you send wave after wave after wave of an expendable unit at something, eventually the 6 billion has to defeat the 1,000.
That is fair. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week. It's been really lovely to chat with you. Can you let our lovely listeners know where they can find you and all of your things?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I know third time's the charm. We tried to do this a couple other times, and I had live things going. So appreciate the patience, and thank you so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun to be here with both of you today. You can find me on twitch.tv/Loctavian. I stream there 6 days a week. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and social media as Loctavian00, because Loctavian was unfortunately taken out social media. So Loctavian00 on all my socials, and just Loctavian on YouTube and Twitch.
Thank you very much. And thanks to you, our lovely listeners, for tuning into the show. If you've enjoyed it, please let other people know and give it a review wherever you are listening to us. Rating and reviewing the show will really help other people find it. You can also give us a review over at the Bonus Roll podcast directory. Go to bonusroll.gg/directory to find it. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Twitter at 10th Divine Pod, or you can email us at 10thdivinepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to find us in other places, you can find me, Raven, over at Girls Gone WoW, if you're a World of Warcraft fan. Or if tabletop RPGs are your thing, check out As the Dice Roll, where I'm part of the crew of Cautious Optimism. You can also find me on Twitter at Silky Raven, or over at the Girls Gone WoW Discord at girlsgonewow.net/Discord. There's a channel over there for ESO related chatter, and it's a lovely community full of lots of other gaming nattering.
And you can find me, Shanty, on Twitter or Twitch, where I'm streaming a variety of MMOs, at both of which are at Shantyman Gaming. You can also find me on the Girls Gone Wild Discord, joining in the ESO chatter and gaming chat, as well as a number of other ESO Discords. If you happen to see me online, feel free to say hello.
Thanks very much, everyone, and we will speak to you all in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.